This is the DRS Sports Podcast, episode 85. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Sheldon Alexander, with a special reminder to like and subscribe to our YouTube page so that you never miss any of our expert betting insights. Speaking of, another win against the spread as we were on the Celtics minus 3.5, bringing the record to 39-29 against the spread in the play-in/playoffs, and an overall NBA record against the spread of 51-33-1 this season on this pod talking basketball. Surprise, surprise. Again, the Warriors and Celtics have yet to lose 2 games in a row. Celtics with a huge bounce back, just like we said they would. Well, the Celtics win game 3 of the NBA Finals to take a 2-1 lead in a blowout. And I mean, there might have been a pod that you could have listened to that might have told you this is a very likely scenario. Mr. Matt Russell, how are you doing after the game 3, 116-100 Celtics victory?
Yeah, I'm good. It's funny, like, what constitutes a blowout these days, right? Like, it was a convincing victory the entire time. We did have that crazy run by the Warriors to take the lead in the third quarter Warriors, obviously. And so I go, like, that was a blow, but it was also actually, and this is kind of sad, one of the more entertaining games of the entire playoffs, even though it kind of stretched out. And of course, we didn't get, like every other game, we didn't get much in the last 5 minutes. But all in all, interesting game that I think we both have a lot to sort of talk about.
So one thing right off the front end, I'm the basketball nerd, so I'm not going to like change the channel, like even drawing a blowout. But sure. I wonder if like people are just being chased off of these games because there are blowouts, and maybe there's been, 4 games where one of these games are a blowout and then like the other team actually comes back and it's like interesting, but most often than not, it's been blowout city. I wonder if people were chased off of last night's game, just kind of like, okay, Celtics up 18, I'm out. I'm going to bed. And it's late on the East Coast as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, if that run had come, 5, 10, 15 minutes later of like real time, not even basketball time, you wonder how many more people or how fewer people would have seen it. But I actually think that was, again, we talked about the idea of like rose colored glasses when looking at the, either of these teams. I thought that was a pretty good sign from the Warriors at the very least, that it was like, okay, you talked about how we predicted sort of the idea that like, okay, like if the Celtics win this game, it could be, pretty convincingly, you kind of know what the script is going to be, right? Like a rabid Celtics, fan base that if the Warriors aren't ready, and I mean, honestly, who could be, because that place was as loud as it obviously has been all throughout the playoffs, which is, comforting, nice to see from, if you'd bet on the Celtics. So like, yeah, like of course the Celtics got up to a 15-point lead early. Like what else was going to sort of happen in that game? And then the fact that like the Warriors did, when everything sort of settled down at halftime, right? In a lot of these cases, whether it's like, first quarter of an NFL game, certainly a first period of a hockey game, you just go, okay, can we just survive this first part? And like the Warriors hung in, and even just being sort of down 10-ish going into that second half, you're like, okay, like I'll see what happens here in this third quarter. And then they come back and they take the lead at one point, despite having some pretty significant, not disadvantages necessarily, though, again, in theory, they could be disadvantages. But like the thing that stood out to me, for example, is like the Warriors just didn't get any rebounds yesterday. And so, my eye test takeaway is like, when you look at these matchups that we talked about, and we talked about like kind of the, you talk offense, defense, right? So like, Marcus Smart, like he can slow down Steph Curry, and like we always do the whole like slow down thing. I look at it going like the size mismatch with the Celtics is less about just defending and like getting a hand in someone's face and all of that sort of thing, because like open shots are getting created, sort of the nature of the flow of a Warriors offense. But the size thing, at least last night, had a ton to do with rebounding and rim protection and points in the paint and stuff like that. Now, all of that, as we talk about, like gets thrown in, to the recipe, gets thrown into the stew, and it comes out in, as we talk about a shot quality sort of number. But like, that's really a galvanizing effect to the crowd. It's a galvanizing effect to the team. Now, I look at it and I'm like, man, like, how do the Warriors ever get rebounds? Because you can literally go through like matchup by matchup, and it's like, this guy's bigger than this guy, like Smart bigger than Curry, all the way down to like, you know, Robert Williams bigger than basically anybody that the Warriors are going to bring out there. And by the way, all of a sudden, Robert Williams is like spry. Like, he's jumping through the gym. It's like, did he do a quick flight to Germany? The old Kobe Bryant show. Shout out Cobes. So I just look at it and I go, okay, well, what happened in these first two games from a rebounding standpoint? And the interesting thing to me, because again, I'm always trying to figure out, okay, is this just kind of an outlier, or is this sort of statistically, you know, while I look at it and I go, okay, that dude's bigger than that dude, that dude's bigger than that dude, is this something that's a trend throughout the series? And I went back and I checked out those first two games, and like dead even rebounding numbers.
Yeah.
In Golden State. And I was just sort of like, huh. So, you know, sometimes with rebounding, it's literally bounding off of a backboard, and sometimes the ball just keeps going to one team. Like, they're not like skying over people to get a rebound. There was a lot of rebounds that like hit the ground first. So I just sort of like, okay, the Celtics had more energy. They already have more size. And I think that's what led to a discrepancy in rebounding. And I think it was interesting that Draymond Green after the game was that, you know, I played like bleep. And he sort of took the L as you were hoping that he might, and sort of admitted to that. And so I'm still on the same sort of, you know, prescription, the same path that I was before, where it's like, okay, like the Celtics could win this game, but if we're going to keep getting plus 150 on the money lines, I'm going to bet the Warriors on the money line and plus 150 in game 4, because again, this rebounding discrepancy hasn't shone through all series long, right? It was just yesterday. The frustrating and infuriating part about the Celtics is that they are inconsistent, right? You don't know from one game to the next what you're going to get.
One quarter to the next.
Yeah. And you got the heavy energy version of the Celtics, and I imagine they're still going to have some energy. My concern for the Warriors would be they wasted a Klay Thompson game where he sort of had some turn back the clock shooting there. But again, he got enough shots up, let me tell you. So, you know, again, plus 150, like, again, I still think the series goes game 6, game 7. And whether it's plus 150 on the money line or the series price at plus 190, you can, again, start massaging things a little bit more here at plus 190 with the Warriors to get that plus price that we're looking for late in the series, so that you can take the Celtics at better value, so that you can grab the points in a game 7, something along those lines, should we get there. I think, you know, again, nothing happened last night that was unexpected, I guess. And that's kind of the point you and I talk about all the time. Like, we don't often kind of just go back and say, oh yeah, the thing that we were hoping or the thing that we thought was going to happen happened, because it just kind of does. We always kind of look back and go like, what went wrong? You know, I don't know that anything went wrong yesterday. It was just like, yep, Celtics got out to a big lead early. Like, kudos to the Warriors for forcing that, you know, game to be close in the third quarter. And then you know, and then that, you know, maybe they ran out of gas, right? Like in it from a game to game standpoint, like that happens to the best teams out there. And of course the Celtics win that game going away in the fourth quarter. So nothing crazy I thought from that game.